Namaskar.
Welcome to viewers again. Hope in the last session, whatever we were able to discuss and bring to you, whatever Krishna was able to explain, define the basic ground point of why the departure, why at all. ShrirmadAcharya decided to enunciate his metaphysics called Dvaita Tattvavad, as it is called. And today we will talk a little more and try to go deeper into his epistemology. That is the experiential wisdom of what is laid down as the building blocks of the entire ecosystem. That's what we will start. Of course, it's a very long topic. We will take it piece by piece. And Krishna, I just want to share a couple of things with you, which might be useful for you to build your arguments on. There are a couple of chapters in Sumanta Vijaya, which is basically a biography of ShrirmadAcharya, which talks about his experience as an Advaiti Yati under Advaiti Guru. A couple of passages which mentions that he was explaining Advaita so beautifully. That was very interesting observation for me. And at the same time, Sumanta Vijaya mentions that he took the intellectual right, adhikara, which every jignasu has, to be critical of Shankara in a couple of points. It mentions that as well. And over a period of time, Sumanta Vijaya explains that he formulated his own structure, as it were, which is different from Shankara's structure, and even his own guru got convinced about it. It mentions that both of them jointly expounded the new edifice, is what I understood, rightly, wrongly, I don't know. You kindly correct me. But in all those things, I am also reminded of. It may not be mentioned in Sumanta Vijaya to the best of my knowledge, but there is some kind of a folklore that there was some degree of dispute around Ishta Siddhi. And for the viewers, post Shankara, there are four Siddhis: Brahma Siddhi, Naishkarma Siddhi, Ishta Siddhi, and Advaita Siddhi. There are four Siddhi texts which try to represent, as it were, Shankara's viewpoint on what is Brahma is all about, what is Brahma Jnana is all about, and how do we get that, etc. And I find that not only Advaitis, but all of it, like Nayayikas or Bauddhas or anybody, all of them, including, I'm sure you would agree with me, even Madhvacharya, agree that there's an error in perception. That is where the problem lies. What is that error? And source of the error is the dispute amongst all of them. What do you mean by error? For example, Advaitis argue, to put in a very oversimplified term, the error in perception is because you're mistaking that you are different from Brahman. That is the error they talk about. Whereas ShrirmadAcharya mentioned, he also talks about the error, but according to him, the error is exactly the opposite. The error is assuming that you are as independent as powerful Vishnu is. That is the error. So ultimately, all the philosophers, all the metaphysicists, as it were, agree upon a fundamental point that there is an error in the way we understand ourselves, the way we understand the universe, the way we understand the Ishvara Tattva, Brahma Tattva. And this is the source of all the problem, all the sorrow, etc. And I'm told there are 4 or 5 major models of error, what they call as Atma Khyati, Asat Khyati, Akhyati, then Anyata Khyati, and Anirvachaniya Khyati of Advaita. And my understanding of whatever I read about ShrirmadAcharya's life history and his various debates, etc., personally, I feel that could be a point of departure for him. This Anirvachaniya Khyati, Anirvachaniya by basic concept, probably is something which he disliked. You take a position, you say this way or that way. You cannot say, I cannot say it's real also, I cannot say it's unreal also. So what are you trying to say? That seems to be his botheration, because I find in many of his texts, he takes this idea and attacks it several different ways. Therefore, though I'm not able to get any textual reference about the exact point on which the Ishta Siddhi dispute happened, Ishta Siddhi seems to be focused tremendously, though all the cities also talked about it, almost entirely in the source of error and trying to define why the error is there. And therefore, I think that could have been a really, pardon me for using this term, a red rag for ShrirmadAcharya, who thought Vishnu Tattva is a very positive entity. There's no question of mistaking about it. And the universe is also a positive reality. It is not an imagination by Indrajal kind of a thing. And therefore, trying to say that is neither real nor unreal is really, begging the question rather than answering that question. That must have been his point of dispute in my view, but I will leave it to you to explain. In this context, if you would kindly explain to all of us how his epistemology addressed all these issues. I know it's not going to be in over one lecture, but take your time, like you normally do, systematically and logically build the case. So back to you, Krishna.
Thank you. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Narasimha Akhilajnana Matadbhanta Divakaraha Jayatyamita Sagyana Sukha Shakti Payonidhi Abhramam Bhangarahitam Ajadam Vimalam Sada Anandarirthamatulam Bhaje Tapatrayapaham Apadamodi Varyantam Gurunam Akritim Smaret Tena Vignaha Pranashyante Siddhyanti Cha Manorathaha. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. So you have in your prelude, you have covered quite a wide range of topics, and in fact, epistemology as such is a wide topic. What I want to focus in today's discussion is on the idea of Sakshi that Acharya considers so important to his epistemology. Typically, when you talk about epistemology, people say, at least in the context of the Bharatiya darshanas, right? People talk about what are their sources of knowledge. For example, an Advaitin will say there are 6 sources of knowledge, right? I have Pratyaksha, I have Anumana, I have Agama, and Anupalabdhi, or Abhava, and so on and so forth, Arthapatti. And or you may have a Nayayika who says there are only 4 sources of knowledge, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, and Upama. And then you have both the Dvaitins and Visishtadvaitins who may say this kind of stuff. So, we'll come to that thing a little later. I mean, what is the epistemology there? I think more important is to build the base on what we discussed in the previous session, which is, the nature of the experiencer, right? Because that is what is given to us in universal experience. So Acharya's theory, everything is built from there. Agama can come in later, the different types of pramanas can come in later. It is kind of common knowledge also, but anyway, let me state that even according to Dvaitins, there are 3 types, unlike the 6 types in Advaita, which is Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama are the 3 sources of knowledge, 3 pramanas. The same thing is held even in Visishtadvaita school for that matter. And though, Mimamsakas, especially the Bhattas and the Advaitins say that it is 6. So the number may go here and there, but essentially I think, they can be clubbed under these 3 broad groups. In fact, Advaitin says they cannot be clubbed and Dvaitin says they can be clubbed. But that's more of a, a technical detail. And we need to eventually understand the reason for that technical detail also. It is more from, how you define, for example, Anumana. What are all the assumptions that you make about different parts of an Anumana versus let's say what is there in Arthapatti, and why Dvaitins will claim that, for example, Arthapatti, which is considered a different type of pramana, is actually a special form of Anumana itself. So we can get into those details, but what I want you to take away is how I got convinced about Dvaita. I may have born in Dvaita, but I was almost on my way to become a Nastika at one point of time, right?
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Go ahead, please.
That is a very interesting point you mentioned, because if you can explain what were you before you became a Dvaiti and why you became a Dvaiti, very helpful, because that's the kind of journey I believe that every one of us who are no more, having a Upanayana Garbhashtami and then joining a Matha for Vedic scholarship, we have become civilians, quote unquote. Therefore, many of us go through this, right? Yeah. So if you don't mind, if you can, a little bit of your personal experiences, that would be very helpful to many people.
Yeah. So as you know, my background, which we talked in the last session, right? I went into a regular engineering college, and like most people of my generation at that time, we basically started believing more in science, which seems to explain most phenomena very well, even if the ones that it is not able to. We are kind of sure that that will happen over time, and there is so, and we also we all were very happy with the kind of statements like Galileo statement, right? I don't need a place for God in my argument, kind of thing, and all that stuff. And there was also an argument with my friend, who basically said that if God, who is a perfect being, created this, there won't be so many imperfections here, right? So there were some of these discussions that we had, and I was not a Nastika in full force, but I almost was there, though I used to do my Sandhya Vandanam and all those things, but the mind was still a Nastika at the end of the day, right? Externally, we may be doing lots of things, but yeah. But what changed my mind was Acharya's discussion on Apaurishayatva. Basically, he says that Veda is Pramana, and that is because it is Apaurishaya. And second was his points on how do you establish the presence or the existence of a jiva or a sentient principle as fundamentally different from that of matter. Whatever I mentioned as the two cornerstones, they were the ones which brought me into this fold. And there were many a time when I used to think that I secretly like him, and I want to be a conformist, and that's why I am trying to accept it. So there have been many internal struggles, and after going through all of that, I felt that these are logically very fortified. They cannot be wished away. They cannot be explained away, and it's agreed. I mean that many people will not get it, or many people will not find it agreeable, but still it is logical. So that's how I got onto this journey, and I'm very thankful to Acharya, his Antaryami. They are the ones who got me here. I don't think I could have had any such exposure by myself, and I hold them responsible for getting me here, and I'm thankful to them for the same reason. And it is Acharya alone, basically. I mean, be it Jayatirthuru, Vadirajuru, Rairu, there are many saints who have come in. They have all helped, no doubt, with their this thing. But my first brush was with Acharya himself. And when you read his works, there is a certain force, that is an inescapable force that will hit you if you are open to it. And so that's where that's how I am here. So we will come to that point of epistemology. Basically, is important that when we said, right, in the last discussion that we had, we said that consciousness is something which is fundamentally different from matter, right? That what is this consciousness about? How is it different? And what are the regular theories about that, right? When I go into this, so there are certain points that I would like to make here. So first thing is that, again here, right, this is all not coming. We don't need to accept any of these things because Madhvacharya told or because some Veda told or none of those things. These are given to our own experience, and the conclusions here are drawn or derived from that experience. So Acharya says that he gives one definition of this one, right? Ahamityeva yo vedyah sa jiva iti kirtitah sa dukhi sa sukhi chaiva Sa patram bandhamokshayoho. This is the definition of a jiva or sentience.
Right.
So many people think that, sentience means wherever you have these three qualities like jnana, ichcha, kriya, knowledge, desire, and kriya, action. If you go a little deeper, it is volitive action. Basically, something that even there is action even in jada, right? For example, the fan is moving around, but that is not volitive action. So kriya is basically volitive action. So when you dig deeper into this, even in those three characteristics, the fundamental thing that is different is that self-referential knowledge. See, every knowledge has a knower and an object of that knowledge, or the subject of the knowledge and the knower of the knowledge, right? Wherever that knowledge resides, or the knower. So if you take, for example, a robo, right, or an AI algorithm, or not an algorithm per se, right? You can say that there is one loose notion of an a knower, and then there is something that is known over there, right?
Exactly.
You have an image, for example, that is coming there, or you have a video coming in over there. These are all objects.
Right.
It doesn't, but who is the knower? The knower is different. The knowledge is different. For example, when I say I know this pot or I know this apple, right? I am the subject or the knower, and that is the object. This is true in most of the cases, where that is, they are different in most of the cases. But when I say I know myself, I know whatever this I is, right? That is impossible in matter, right? That self-referential knowledge is impossible in matter. We don't see an electron saying, you know what, I went through, if I'm referring to the double slit experiment, I went through this slit because I don't like you. It doesn't say that.
Can I interrupt you for a moment there?
Sure.
Logically, I understand what you're saying, that matter does not have a self-referential knowledge. At least he doesn't say so. He's a logical. But don't you think that's a little presumptuous, because Atapati there actually, because you don't know the language of matter. Even if the electron was screaming, you don't know the language of electron.
True. I'll ask you a different question then, counter question. How do you know that there is sentience in me right now? Other than you yourself, right? Every other being, so to speak, right, around you, human or animal or any other being, how do you know there is a sentient principle over there? It is known only through inference.
Correct.
Acharya says this thing in his Upadhi Kandana, right? I infer that there is a sentient being in you because you have cheshta. Cheshta means you have ishta prapti. You basically endeavor to obtain something that you like and to avoid something you dislike, or something which is not desirable. So right. Ishta prapti and anishta parihara. You attempt, you endeavor to do either of these two things or both of them at times.
Right.
So from there, I infer that, okay, there is a sentient being over there. On the other hand, a robo will not behave like that. We may go into further details. I can program a robo also to do like that kind of thing. But then, its likes and dislikes are also, then you come to the point of how do you know it likes that, right? So then you say, okay, let me go to some cases where there is uninfluenced situation, and then let's see how it works. And, we can build the argument there, but essentially, at least in our experience or our understanding of electrons or atoms or any of this matter thing, we have not seen any such cases. Their behavior is pretty much predictable, and it is not based on any like or dislike, right? So that's why we will say that they are insentient and then we are sentient. Even if you take the double slit experiment or any of those things, right? They don't prove to existence of a like or a dislike in that electron, why it is going through a particular slit, right? So yeah, so that is fundamentally different in consciousness. So there is a self-referential knowledge, okay? So you may be this self-awareness or this self-referential. See, in fact, if you look at science, right, they have been talking about hard problem of consciousness or the easy problem of consciousness. Basically, they try to understand the different functions of the brain. Why is that I see? Why is that there are sensory inputs, and how do we interpret them? And then there are different mental states. So there is a study that is done to all of that, and some people, they say there are two types of problems, which is hard and then easy. Some people say there is only one problem of consciousness, easy. Whereas according to us, at least in the Bharatiya Darshanas, it is only one simple thing, which is self-reference. What causes this self-reference is nothing but the sentience. That self-reference is itself sentient. Now, again, the word self is little overloaded. Okay, it's not that straightforward. So, for example, I refer to my own body also as self. I came here myself, I will say, right? Or, I may be talking about my mind also. I am happy, or I'm what do you call? In fact, that is a little tricky example. We'll come to that thing a little later. I may say that I'm angry at so and so person, or I am very kind to another person. So there are these mental states to which we are aware of. Now, in all these things, there is a self-reference to that I principle. I. Now that I is what we call as the jiva or the sentience thing, which is not there in other things. Now, science may say, it is because of some presence of neurons in the brain that this illusion of consciousness is there. I mean, at least I have not been convinced about that. It doesn't seem convincing. Why would evolution need an illusion to grow, right? So, I mean, there are a lot of other arguments that may come in. Also, this self that we are talking about, self-awareness, what does that self refer to is another big question there. Okay, we are saying that there is sentience, but does it refer to the body, or does it refer to the mind? What does it refer to?
Right.
So what Acharya does in his Gita Bhashya and in other places is to say that this particular self is something that is available even in deep sleep. Okay, see, this is again where the regular understanding of the three states of consciousness, so to speak. Acharya's analysis is different from the Advaitins' analysis over there. We'll come to that thing a little later. But his point is that this self is available even when the mind is inactive, which is in deep sleep. Okay, so therefore it is essentially different from the mind. Okay, and not only that, it is therefore you also have irreducible knowledge. Basically, you cannot break this I into smaller degrees or smaller parts. Okay, therefore this I is one unit, and that is irreducible. It is immutable for that very reason. All of this is available to us through regular experience. You don't need any knowledge of scriptures to be able to appreciate this. And therefore, this I, which is irreducible, which is not a product of anything, for that very reason, because it is irreducible, it cannot be a product of some things coming together and then forming that, right? And therefore, it is also a thing in itself, and that thing in itself is what is called as sentience or consciousness or chaitanya or chetana, jiva, all of that. So this is his first point. So if you are
let me take a pause here. Therefore, if I understand you correctly, your proposition is that understanding this concept of sentience as a self-referencing intelligence is the starting point. If you do not have it, or even I would say that this is the basic platform or foundation concept on which the entire TATTVA stands. Is that your argument? If that is so, do you think that other systems do not have this?
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. I'll come to the other systems point of this one. See, everybody understands that there is a self-referential thing there, okay? It's not like they understand that thing, but what they attribute that self-referential thing is where the difference lies. For example, right? Science may say that there is some sort of neurons that flow, which is which gives this notion of this identity kind of thing, and that is their take on that. The Mimamsa school says, for example, right, they are called Triputa Pratyakshivad. They say, for example, that the knowledge by itself is self-referential. Okay, and this Atma, or whatever they call as Atma, is illuminated when I say, is one of the things that gets illuminated when I say, I know there is a pot. Okay, so when I say there is a pot, there are three things that get illuminated according to the Mimamsa. One, that knowledge itself is there. Second, the pot itself. And three, the knower. So for a Mimamsaka, the self-referential thing is there in the knowledge itself. Okay, because there is something called as knowledge, the Atman is also is known over there. They call this as Triputa Pratyaksha. Basically, there are three things that get illuminated or known in any process of knowledge. That is their idea. The Nyaya school says, Atma is self, this one is fine, but it is the Manas which is able to do, Anuvyavasaya, I know that there is pot. I know that there is a pot. I know about my own knowledge, that is called Anuvyavasaya. From this, Atma as being self, so basically there is no fund of self-reference over there. Okay, it is this process of unending process of Anuvyavasaya which gives the notion of this Atma. How else? I mean, that is one part in the Nyaya thing. The Advaita school basically says that, consciousness is essentially indescribable. You cannot really say what truly it is. It is knowledge. All knowledge is consciousness. Then how do you explain the process of knowledge? So I'm sure you are well aware of that, right? There is some part of the covering consciousness, which basically the consciousness that has covered the object, the ignorance that has been covered, that is covering the object. For example, a pot, that gets removed and only to that much part of knowledge gets exposed over here. I'm sure it is more complex than that one, but that is the Advaita standing over there. So the self-referential, self-referencing thing is truly not there in consciousness in Advaita. But in Acharya Siddhanta, that is there as the fundamental property of sentience. In fact, if it is not there, you cannot say there is sentience. Okay. So the corollary of that is that at this point, there may be, infinite beings over here. As long as they all know I am experiencing and the experiencer is different, they can coexist in the same smallest, minutest or the most minute point of space. In fact, there is another pramana which says so, Paramanu Pradeshepi Hinanto hi Jivarashaya. So Acharya gives that thing. So that is the fundamental distinguishing Lakshana, the asadharana dharma, that's what they call it in the regular parlance, which is that the unique characteristic of sentience, or whatever you call as intelligence, right, is to be able to know oneself. So I mean, so for example, if Descartes, right, he says that I think, therefore I am. Yeah, here it's not like that. I know I am. That is the point. Okay. And so Advaita basically doesn't believe that there can be the self-referential knowledge. They cite this thing called as Kartru Karma Virodha. We talked about it a little bit in the previous session. So he says, for example, this is mostly, to the best of my knowledge, as far as I know, this is a grammatical principle. So how do you define a Kartru? How do you define a karma in a kriya? Right? So Kartru is that who has the uddeshya for the action, who has a goal about the action, the kriya, and karma is that which is the locus of the fruit of that action. So Rama killed Ravana is there. So Ravana is the karma, the object, and Kartru is Rama. So the act of killing has its phala or its result. Okay, the fruit of that is where it is in Ravana. Who is the one who had that uddeshya? That is Kartru. Okay. So to define a difference between these two, they basically come up with this thing called Kartru cannot be the karma kind of thing. This is what is there in Vyakarana, but apparently they have taken it in the philosophical realm also. And Advaita says, the conscious is not something that can know itself, kind of thing. But Acharya insists that that is the first point, and that is the only distinguishing characteristic of sentience. And unless that is accepted, right? Let's look at the other part of if everything is physical, right? If you take physicalism for that, and why are we even doing any sadhana? Why do we have any of these things at all, right? After all, everything is going to go kaput after some time. And what is this evolution about? What is this natural selection? What is the reason for, even wanting to persist? After all, everything will anyway persist by default, right? So, yeah, so it goes into a lot more, other implications that we have. But according to Acharya, that self-reference is the fundamental property of consciousness. And this is told even in the famous Advaitic sentence, right? Or Mahavakya. It is there in the Upanishad. Aham Brahmasmi. There Brahma himself says, I am Brahman. So there is self-referential knowledge there itself. Okay. So Kartru Karma Virodha, Acharya says that it has no evidence. Okay. It may be true for most of the things, but it is not the only case. There are exceptions like, I know myself. So this is an non-controvertible fact of life, or fact you cannot explain it away, you cannot walk it over. That there is self-referential knowledge. Now this I comes with other things also. Okay, it is not plain bland consciousness or anything like that. There are other things that it is a subject to. It sees these things. Okay, take the simple example of illusion. You refer to illusion over there, the error in cognition, right? There may be different types of illusions. Okay, I may cognize a snake and eventually it will turn out to be not a snake, but it is a rope kind of thing. Or I may actually see a regular snake, actual snake, and where you can see this one. So this consciousness also understands that there are two things. One is an illusion and one is a non-illusion, real thing. It is subject to both these experiences. It is also subject to, okay, there are three states. One is Jagrat, one is this thing, or whatever you call that, right? There are definitely these different states through which my awareness is there. Okay. Then take the example of sushupti itself, the deep sleep or the dreamless sleep. Even in science, according to science, after you go through the REM stage, the rapid eye movement stage, right? There are 3 levels of brain waves, right? N3, I think, is what they call it, right? That is where it's dreamless and you have larger brain waves with more, less frequency and more amplitude kind of thing. So this is sushupti for you, right? So Advaitins and everybody, and even our own experience says there is nothing at sushupti. But that is not truly the case, right? There is no judgment that is being passed at that time. As soon as I wake up, I say, Etavantam kalam aham sukhena apsvapsam. I have slept peacefully for so long, right? I have had a blissful sleep for so long. In fact, everybody craves for that deep sleep, right? Who experienced that sleep, peacefulness then, or bliss then? Who experienced time then? Because according to all darshanas, all schools of thought, mind is kind of numb then, or more, at least even if you take science, it is more or less, for the most part, it is inactive. The brain is inactive. So what truly is experiencing this bliss then, and what truly is experiencing this time then? So most other darshanas, they basically say that it is something that is, that is a judgment that is coming in little later. It is not the property or the experience of the whoever is the experiencer in sushupti.
Correct.
But that too is not true. If you look at our own experience, the judgment is coming later. But if there was no experience of bliss or anything like that at all at that time, how is it even coming in later? right? What is the basis for even the mind to project that, okay, this was the, you experienced time and you experienced bliss. I mean, you see how how Acharya looks at every phenomena and tries to see what is real over there and then uses to basically establish his theory. So what others consider as, in fact, most Advaitins think that if you do an impartial analysis of the three states, it is kind of given that, Advaita is kind of established over there. I mean, at least most people think like that, but not truly. In fact, if you look at all these three states, the self or whatever is there in that sushupti, whatever is the experiencing in that sushupti, experiencer in that state is also experiencing bliss, is also experiencing time, and it is also experiencing itself.
Yes.
I am not telling anything at that point of time, okay, but whatever I tell, whatever is more an articulation of that experience, it may come little later, but that experience happens right then there.
Yes.
Okay. So in fact, Advaitins think that, only I do not know what happened then is the judgment they take and they analyze. So therefore there is experience of even ajnana at that time is what they think. Even let's say that much is true. The self experiences ajnana, but it also experiences in the same way, right? It also experience by the same token. It also experiences knowledge of itself. It also experiences time, and it also experiences bliss. Because of these three things, you have to accept that there is something called as sentient, which is beyond the mind, or which is beyond the brain, which is beyond the manas, which is beyond the indriya, and which is also subject of time, which can cognize time, which can cognize itself,
Yes.
which can cognize its happiness, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And these are
recall.
Sorry.
Unable to recall after the sushupti stage.
Yeah, and are able to recall at this stage. Now, I mean, the recalling part, some people say it is because of the manas, because the recall is happening little later. Let's say that it is open to, interpretation or debate or whatever it is, right? But what cannot be controverted, what cannot be explained away is its own experience in sushupti. And that can never be wrong.
Can I ask you a
These
question?
three things. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. How are we doing on time? On your scope of your conversation today, how are we doing?
I have, let's say I need another 10 minutes.
Okay. So my struggle, I'm sure many of the viewers would agree with me here, is that you just said, if I understood correctly, that the recalling mind comes later in what you said. But the counter argument is, if in sushupti everything is almost to the lowest minimum level of existence, if the mind was not active, if the memory is not active at that point in time, where is the instrument of recollection? You cannot recall out of nothing.
Yeah, so therefore, we believe that, Sakshi or the sentience also has the power to recollect.
Yeah.
Okay, we believe that way. Other schools may not. So that's why, since it is a gray area, I just left it out of the equation and said that at least these cannot be, debated upon. It has to be accepted as fundamentally given in our universal experience.
So if I understand correctly, can I put it this way? The Sakshi concept, which is so unique in Dvaita TATTVA VADA, not present in anybody else, though use Sakshi in a different sense. Others do use the word in a different
I'll come to that.
Here it's an entity which apparently is constituted of the self-awareness plus a little bit of memory, a little bit of activity of ability to recall when you get out of the sushupti stage, all bundled together. Is this what is called Sakshi?
Yeah, Sakshi is the cognizing agent of the jiva or whatever it is, right? Consciousness has other things also. For example, happiness is there. In Dvaita philosophy, we say that even just like Param Jyoti, the Paramatma, even we are also illuminating, and we basically reflect the same light or whatever it is there. And then there are balam and all these things. What are other qualities are also there of that jiva? The cognizing part is called Sakshi. So I had to correct you on one small point there. The recalling part is there majorly predominantly in the manas in our day-to-day lives. Okay, so when you take my Sakshi, when you take my jiva and then put it into another body, let's say, I mean, theoretically, if the manas doesn't follow, okay, I may not know things about this particular, what do you call, birth or whatever you call that, wherever the manas was associated. But but according to our philosophy, again, from what Krishna tells in the Gita, right, even the manas also goes with the jiva and it finally drops off at the time of moksha. After that, it is purely the Atma which is there, which is all experiencing, Jakshan, Kridan, Ramvanaha, that's what Chandogya Upanishad says, right? Or, so that is another important thing about this Sakshi, right? The Sakshi is, or the Jiva, right? We'll come to more of this in the, what do you call, when we talk about the ontology. But for Advaitins or any most of these idealists, right? If you look at the very basic interpretation of Gita, right? Basically, qualities like desire, sukha, dukkha, happiness, bliss, sadness, they all belong to the kshetra. Okay, that's what is there in the 13th chapter. Okay, and so that is the body, or the prakriti. They don't belong to the Atma is the theory that everybody else comes up with. Okay. But according to Acharya, that is not the case. According to Upanishad, that is not the case. Okay, for example, if you look at the Upanishad itself, right, Sankalpa Deva Tatshrutehe, that is a sutra which says that. Okay, when the Mukta, he says that, okay, now I want to see my people who were forefathers when I was in this samsara, right? He's able to, he'll just go meet them at that moment, that very instant. There is no gap between his desire to see and also the act happening, that getting into fruition. This shows that there is desire even in moksha. In fact, the Taittiriya Upanishad Vakya, which says that, what is that? Brahmavid apnoti param, satyam jnanam anantam brahma. And then it says, Brahmana samanushnute. He basically, sarvan kaman brahmana vipastita samanushnate. He basically enjoys all his desires. So basically, these are desires at two levels, okay, in Dvaita philosophy. One is, which is at the mental level, the manas, okay. There can be lots of wrong desires also that come and go over there. And then there is the desire which is intrinsic to the jiva, and that stays on. Okay. They may come, they may manifest and unmanifest, but they are essential part of the jiva itself. And that's what shows up in moksha. That's what gets fulfilled in moksha, according to this one. Similarly, recalling also is mostly there in manas. It is an effect of, is a function of manas. It is a function of brain in samsara. But there is the capability of the jiva to also go and reflect on what happened to it in its samsara, according to Madhva's philosophy, based on one sentence that he gives in his Chandogya Bhashya, which says that, the jiva will go back and then, see how it suffered and what was its ignorance, and then it will feel thankful to Vishnu for giving it moksha. So this particular sentence is there, which means that it has a ability to recollect. So there are some of these overlapping functions, right? But so in samsara, manas is the main thing, right? I will not, for example, not recollect you in my sushupti, right? I mean, that would be more in the dream based on some samskara, but not in sushupti.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Now the point I was trying to get to is, see, this Sakshi or this particular sentient being, its judgments are never wrong. It is also given to us. See, for example, its own experience. See, all our antaranga bhavana, right? Whatever is there, whatever is internal, right? I am feeling angry. I am not feeling angry, or I am calm. I am little perturbed, not that much perturbed, or I am hungry. All these internal things. Who is watching all of that? That is Sakshi only. I may have an illusion with respect to an external entity. I may mistake a rope and snake, that thing, right? But here I cannot. It is never there. So Acharya makes this point in his, again, Gita Tatparya. In fact, if you compare Shankara Gita Bhashya on 13th chapter, right? Especially around, I think this is 20th, 21st or 22nd shloka, around that place, right? He makes a big case for why the entire kshetra is illusionary, is avidya karya. Acharya has only one point over there. He says that, look, people to whom they say that it is all illusion, the Lord himself has given an answer. Purushaha Prakritistan Bhumte, he enjoys, he experiences all these things. So the experience cannot be, the experience of Sukha Dukkha cannot be explained away or cannot be wishwashed as temporary. You know, this will be sublated later, this will be corrected later. Not possible. In fact, Acharya makes some very important point there. Let me complete this.
Yeah.
He says that Sakshi, right? At the end of it, like, I mean, keep the Sakshi or Dvaita thing for a moment. When we discuss all these philosophies, what are we trying to convince? There should be something that needs to be convinced, no? Is it my mind or what is that we are trying to convince over there? And what is the nature of that getting convinced, that arbiter? So Acharya says that Sakshi is the one which needs to get convinced. So even if it is Advaita or Dvaita or Veda is Aporushaya or not Aporushaya, whatever you say, right? Or even if it is, let's say, quantum mechanics, right? What is that which needs to get convinced? That is the Sakshi itself. That is that sentient being which is self-referential. Okay? And you cannot wishwash these Sukha, Dukkha as something else or as false unless you have stronger pramana. Now Sakshi is saying, look, that Sukha, Dukkha is true. It may not be nitya, it may not be permanent, but it cannot be unreal. Even if it is there for the smallest moment. Right? And therefore, whatever you give, whatever pramana you give to say, no, that is all, the Lord has said it is what you call false. I mean, let's say that, Shankara's theory is what even Krishna is upholding. For the argument's sake, let's say that. Even then we will say, no, that cannot be the case. In fact, Acharya says this very well. Nacha anubhava virodhe agamasya pramanyam. You cannot, what do you call, have your agama cannot violate your own anubhava. Again, not every other anubhava, where you have done enough analysis and things like that, where you have removed the scope for error, that cannot be violated, that cannot be overridden. Okay, very important. In fact, Shankaracharya, to his credit, he also says that. Just that, we are more consistent in using that approach. Shankaracharya says that, 1,000 shrutis cannot make Agni cold or a crow white or something like that. He says in, I think, 18th chapter. Yeah. But we follow that approach consistently. We say that whatever is given to us in experience, as long as it is parikshita, it is analyzed and it is well established to your own self, it cannot be overwritten by even scripture. Okay. So it's a very powerful thing. And what is given to us, not only this Sukha, Dukkha, everything is given to this particular thing, but also time is given to this, as we saw it in the case of sushupti. So your Sakshi, which is the final arbiter of what is illusion, what is not illusion, or whatever it is, eventually accepts that there is time, there is bliss, there are fleeting moments, okay, that there are three avasthas. So where is Advaita here? Everything is basically real and it is uncontrovertibly, I am wrong in using that word, but it cannot be controverted. No amount of scripture can remove that. We have to adjust everything to that. So, I mean, it is basically saying that, adjust your theory according to the data, not vice versa, right? So that's what Dvaita is saying here.
Okay.
And this self or this knowledge is what, but then there is one exception or not, it's not really an exception per se. One immediate question that can come is, look, the self also feels I am independent. I can raise my hand whenever I want to. No, but that is also not, that is in a non-unanalyzed situation. If you analyze that further, right, there are situations where your own non-independence will hit you hard. When I am having fever, right? Why all of that, right? Acharya in fact says this thing in his Dwadasha Stotra, right? It's something, which you use when you are doing puja or naivedya or whatever it is, right? He puts in very simple logic over there. Yadinama parona bhavet sarhi katamasya vashe jagate tadabhut yadinamana tasya vashe sakalam khatamevatu nitya sukham na bhavet. Okay, you do not have independence to control everything, anything external, agreed. But if you are truly independent, if you are Brahman, how come you are not happy yourself all the time? Right? So even people who, who have these experiences of they growing infinite and dhyana and all those things, right? They have to admit, look, there was a starting point and before which I did not have this. What is that independent thing which, because of which, why is that I have that dependence, or not, rather, why is that there is no independence in me, because of which I was not able to get to this state at some point of time. So dependence is also given to us in experience. It is not just independence. These are some cases where I can lift my hand as per my will, but there are infinitely many other cases where I cannot do whatever I wish to. So therefore, the experience of independence is not unchallenged, and therefore that cannot be an example for saying that whatever comes to this Sakshi is it can be fallible. Whatever the Sakshi ticks mark, right? It basically ticks off as correct, as valid, is uncontrovertibly so. This is there in Dvaita Siddhanta. In Advaita and other cases, what they do is they basically hold it on buddhi. Buddhi is one of the facets or aspects of manas. Buddhi, chitta, and ahankara, all of these are different aspects of manas. And they say buddhi is the one which is able to discern the illusion from the non-illusion kind of thing. But we'll come to that later. But that also cannot be the case. At the end of it, you need to have whichever is perceiving the happiness or unhappiness or the illusion or whatever it is, right? That and the experiencer of this I-ness both have to be the same. It has to be say that, unless the person, the being or the entity which has that experience of I validates that, okay, now the rope is the true thing and the snake is not the true thing. You cannot say which is illusion, which one is not the illusion, right? I mean, there is no logic, so to speak. Because, I mean, you can say that, okay, you consider snake as the real one, as the unreal one, but how do you know that that is unreal and not vice versa? The only arbiter for that is Sakshi. And this Sakshi has already accepted a multitude of things as real. Okay? The three states or the experience, the bliss, its own self, its own experiences of some illusions and some many correct things, so on and so forth. And therefore, that is the fundamental piece on which the entire epistemology is to, it is the one that needs to get convinced. And so this is very fundamental to Acharya's this one. Next, we can look at, so, whatever the scripture may say, whatever our dhyana give, whatever it may come to, right? Yeah. Eventually, you need to accept that this one is fundamentally not only different, it is the fundamental thing that needs to judge something as correct or not correct. And it has already accepted that there are some correct things, there are some incorrect things, but it has accepted there are some correct as in real things. It has accepted something as real. So multiple reality is a given. And it is given not just, that we are seeing some things here, but it is given as non-controvertible. You cannot remove them. People may call it, naive realism and all that, but yeah, that's more labels that they give to, appease themselves. Yeah, I'm done for the day. I think we will need more time to go through the rest of the topics.
I will kind of summarize. I'll also leave a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Next time. So, in today's conversation, you have placed Sakshi as a unique model or a concept in ShrirmadAcharya's TATTVA VADA, on which everything else depends upon. And you made almost a fulcrum point for the entire Dvaita philosophy. I think we need a little more time to analyze this. Probably you'd do that next time. Because I have a couple of questions here on this, because if you're using the verdict of Sakshi entity as the validation that everything is real and what Acharya said is correct and more correct than others, etc. If that is the argument, you have to answer this question. What happened to all those objects and experience in sushupti where it disappeared?
Sorry, come again? I couldn't get that.
What happened to all the objects and the experience of those objects which disappeared in sushupti? So in sushupti stage, you may choose to call that Sakshi alone remains and everything has disappeared. Then you have to explain what happened to all the real entities gone. Yeah. That is. Therefore, does it not validate Shankara's argument? Those objects and objects-related experiences exist in the waking state and the dream state because the consciousness conjured it. And that's why when everything's trying to minimum existence in sushupti or the dreamless state, they are vanished. So why should we take the objects and the experience of those objects which we see in the waking and dream state so seriously? That is.
I have another counter question on that.
Do you want to do it now? Do you want to do it next time?
This is a small thing. We can. So that I better understand your question. Let's ignore sushupti for the time being, right? We are in the waking state. When I close my eyes, do I say that the laptop has disappeared or do I say that it is not visible to me?
It's not visible to me.
Why not hold the same thing in sushupti?
Because in this case, the laptop exam which you are giving, I am not altering from one conscious state of waking state to another. I continue to be in the waking stage.
Okay.
And then I'm interrupting a signal from reaching my eye. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, but that could be just another state where some signal is not coming to you.
That is arthapati. That's arthapati, presumption. That maybe it is there because in the waking state I see it, and because in dream state I have memory of that. Therefore, it should have existed in the sushupti also, though we do not see it. Is it not an arthapati and using it as a pramana?
Isn't it the other way around? Basically to say that it disappeared needs more pramana, right? I see from where I am, from the ground rules, if you look at it, right? I close my eyes, I don't get some information. I go into deep sleep, I don't get some information. So from the point of not getting information, both these things are alike. There is no difference between them. Now you are saying there is different state of consciousness and things like that, and then saying that there is a difference. So therefore, the disappearance here is qualitatively different from the disappearance in sushupti. For me, I'm not able to understand why it is qualitatively different. Because you already make a change you already presume that there are different states here, and in that state there is the object is actually disappearing. So we don't make that presumption. We just think that it is like closing your eyes in the waking state.
Okay, got it. That is a key counterpoint in the Dvaita Tattva. That's very illuminating. Thank you very much.
In fact, in the Brihadaranya Upanishad Vakya, which says, Ratha Bhavanti, when it describes, right, even the chariots become the non-chariots, or they just vanish and things like that. There we basically think that it is about the dream state objects that vanish or that stop appearing to you. In fact, dream state objects are more are difficult to explain, or they need more explanation in TATTVA. We will come to that thing in subsequent session.
So okay. You also mentioned in today, as a summary, today I would say, you mentioned that this object concept is so unique when compared to other darshanas. So for the sake of completion, and particularly for those who may not know what other darshanas are, and let me put it this way. There are 6 major frameworks used in traditional Indian knowledge analysis, as it were, in trying to understand the whole problem of samsara, the jiva, the universe, Vedas, etc. They are called 6 darshanas. Nyaya, Vaiseshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. We'll call it this way. Nyaya approaches the whole problem using logic as a tool in trying to define either the objects or explain our experience of the objects and explain the final solution. Whereas Vaisheshika uses more a materialistic model in trying to explain everything. The Sankhya, in my mind, is more like a cognitive psychology, trying to create a structure of a human psyche. What are the elements which build up to be a human psyche, which can, various elements of it which will help to grab something outside us, understand them, relate to them, and so on and so forth. So it's a cognitive psychology model in my mind. Whereas yoga tried to use a combination of body, mind, and intellect, and shall we say, activities or exercises of thereof to understand this conundrum. Mimamsa tries to use, what should we say, a Veda defined ritualism as the only valid way of trying to understand this conundrum and escaping from this conundrum. Whereas Uttar Mimamsa or Vedanta as it were, tries to use a metaphysical model to connect all elements to understand and get a solution. In all these 6 models have their own structure of what is consciousness, what is jiva, what is samsara, what is external world, etc., etc. And they use all their own respective viewpoints, use respective conceptual building blocks to understand it. In all those things you believe, even though in Vedanta itself there are 3 viewpoints, Shankara's Advaita, Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita, and Madhva's TATTVA Advaita, you have tried to explain position that Sakshi is such a unique concept, which is not understood or defined the same way in other models, and that is the fulcrum point. So this is the way I summarize. Correct me if I summarization wrong. And hopefully in the next session, since this is a fulcrum point, try to delve deeper into this Sakshi thing and then build and how they are connected. That is one thing. I also want you to address another question.
Sure.
Acharya's argument is that a textual Agama text reference cannot override a personal experience. I think you will have
a verified personal experience.
Personal experience, to use your words. You will have to spend quite some time explaining some point in our conversations, not necessarily next time. Advaita is a valid personal experience for a lot of people. Therefore, Madhvacharya's argument itself will prove that in as much as so many text references Madhvacharya gives, he cannot negate Advaita experience. You will have to understand.
Sure, I'll do that. It may not be very palatable, but I'll sure will at least give my perspective on that.
Absolutely. We are sharing our respective perspectives. So sure. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I think it's just a wonderful conversation today. I have read even Dr. B.N.K. Sharma and others mentioned that Sakshi is such a unique concept of Madhvacharya, which is not so much discussed, debated elsewhere. I think that is a very, very valid criticism. I don't see much of conversation about Sakshi in any forums. I think you should. Maybe there is a reason for it because it's not very clear why it is so unique. Because Sakshi is used very easily by everybody in several different ways. I would ask you to spend a little more time to etch this Sakshi model of Madhvacharya is to be so unique and so important. And that important. You keep repeating that. So I want to challenge you to say why it is so important. Without it, why can't you build the TATTVA without the Sakshi model is something which you should explain. Not necessarily next time, but over a period of time.
I am only worried about the number of sessions going more and more in number.
That's okay.
Sure, but we'll do that. It is essential that we get this right.
For me, trying to share your knowledge, your experience to the audience is more important. I am not concerned with any in a 10 episode, 20 episode. That's not my botheration. As long as you talk, I'll keep recording.
Sure.
Thank
you so much for the opportunity.
It depends on your time, so you must draw a line somewhere.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna.
Krishna Arpanamastu.